Welcome to today's webinar. The purpose of today's demonstration is to walk through the DTech app solutions. So we're going to begin with what we call doc generator, so forms automation, and then transition into two flavors of doc integrator, which is that ServiceNow connection to SharePoint. Throughout today's demo, you'll see and we'll discover consistency with user experience, so you don't have to swivel chair between the different systems. We're going to begin from the perspective of you have a net new contractor, they're hired and they need access to systems. And this actually came about from a client requirement. They had a need for automation with a system access request form, DD 2875. And the reason they needed a solution for automation is they were outputting a large volume of these forms. It was taking a lot of time in order to do so, and it's prone to errors as well. When we think about the life cycle of the request, it hits a lot of different hands. So we're going to start with the core, the contract office rep, transitioning to the requester, the person actually needing access to the systems, and pushing it down the line, supervisor, and so forth. I'm sure we've all been in the same situation where there's 5 individuals, right? We're working on a team, working on a certain document in SharePoint, and there are 5 versions in 5 different folders. So how can we help address that? As previously mentioned, we're going to take it from the perspective of that system access request form DD2875. So as the contract office representative, we see a ServiceNow form right in front of us. And later in the demo, just quick sneak peek, we'll see how all of this information can be converted into a PDF via that doc generation. This could either be manually inputted, right? All of the metadata, all of the fields, or if you have the user already in the sys ID user table in ServiceNow, another place such as the database underlying your PIV or CAC solution, signature solution, we have the ability to ingest that information as well. At the end of the day, we still do need eyes on this. So as the contract office representative, ensuring that all the information we see in front of us, whether it's name, PII, right, social security, et cetera, once we validate it, we can submit this process. So what we just saw was how a contract office representative can easily either manually populate the information or automatically populate the information for the individual, and this would be pushed down the chain. So what you just saw before was the contract office representative living and breathing in ServiceNow. Most likely, especially at this time, the net new contractor won't be doing so. So chances are they're going to be receiving an email. And within this email, it's going to say, you need to do these steps in order to receive access to the systems. From that, we can hop right into the solution, and this takes us to that next step. So similar to before, everyone has that consistent user experience, and we're just trying to get eyes on the form before, or the information before converting it into that PDF via doc generator. So most likely a lot of this information is going to be, blocked out or read only, so we can't modify. There might be some basic information, those phone numbers, the personal email addresses that we can edit. But at the end of the day, once we establish that, similar to the core, once we establish that everything we see in front of us is accurate, is up to date, we can confirm. Before doing so, just a quick point, these are the other individuals involved in that process. So we hit the Atom, which is the requester in this situation. It can go through a pretty lengthy process, and we'll show you how that can be executed. Now here is one of the key points. So if we have to focus on, anything right here is the single pane of glass. So you have two parts. On the top, you have the forms automation or doc generator. So this is taking all of those, the metadata, the information from before, and automatically routing and mapping into the PDFs that we'll see in a moment. So that's on the top. On the bottom, we see all of the documents that will be generated, and this actually is what we call Doc Integrator or the connection to SharePoint. And the reason is these documents actually live in SharePoint. So you don't have to leave your solution, leave ServiceNow to access all the goodness of SharePoint. So ultimately, it's the single pane of glass that we can manage our documentations without having to swivel chair. So following the prescriptive process, we have to upload our cybersecurity certificate. This can be done a few different ways from our local desktop. We can either drag and drop or just upload the file. Once we do so, step one is complete. Now, the next step is very pivotal to what we do as an organization. So DTech Apps, again, that SharePoint to ServiceNow integration, that connection allows us to digitally sign these documents without having to go into SharePoint, ensuring that we are looking at the correct version, and it just supports that quick ease of use. Right before we get into this, just a quick note. David Constantine mentioned earlier about if you're married to a DocuSign, if you're married to an Adobe Pro, you can utilize those. Furthermore, what we're going to see is how you can use Adobe Reader. So that's the free version of Adobe in order to digitally sign these documents via PIV or CAC. So once we kick off this process, again, everything that we know lives in SharePoint, right? So this document lives within SharePoint, and what we are really just doing is digitally signing. And as we noted a few moments ago, automatically all of these pieces were populated. So in the beginning of the demo, we saw the contract office rep. They inputted data. They inputted metadata for the individual. And that is what is used to map and create what we see in front of us. So again, using the PIV or CAC, digitally signing this document, and in a moment, when we reopen it, we'll see that digital signature, and most importantly, we'll see that SharePoint URL, right? Again, just to hit upon it, we are living in SharePoint. And this is where your current documents most likely are living. So trying to centralize that of using the best of ServiceNow and the best of SharePoint. In terms of this use case, we're also required to sign the DISA user agreement. So pretty similar in terms of the experience, so we can knock that out pretty quickly. Before we close out this section, is there anything from the DTech Apps team that they would like to chime in on?
Good by me. Great job, David.
All right. So within the next section, we just completed what we need to do. So as the contractor, we're required to follow the above steps. And once we do so, where does this actually go? And if you recall earlier, that sneak peek of Joaria, who is the supervisor, is the next person, next chain in command in order to view and sign those documents. There's a few ways you can visualize this. First being if Joaria wasn't really in ServiceNow on a day-to-day basis, you can always get that email prompting you to come into the solution and sign. Because she does live and breathe in ServiceNow pretty frequently, we can have dashboards that are, in real time and can prompt her to see what she needs to do, what she needs to take action on. Since we leverage ServiceNow, in this case, what we're looking at is a portal. So just another way to visualize and take action. So one of our tasks come through, and similar to before, we have to sign this document. The difference from before is yes, we're still working on the same document, and this shows how we are collaborating all together. There are not different versions, right, living in different places. So via piv or cac, same type of story, same type of deal. Now, this is the active version, and when we do send it to the next people within the chain of command, ISSO, etc., that will follow that same pattern. So what we just saw is this concludes the first part of the demonstration, and just for redundancy, we could push this to each of the next individuals in the chain, but it's very similar in terms of that user experience. So in the first part of this demo, we went through the full life cycle of a request all the way to granting system access to that contractor atom. Your organization is enabled in a consistent user experience, and this limits the confusion, right, with multiple versions living in different places in SharePoint, and also we can help decrease your tech stack if you did want to go with that Adobe reader. While there are a few working mechanisms, there's a clear, concise route through forms automation, or what we call doc generator, and the SharePoint integration, which we call doc integrator. Before we hop into part two, is there anything that the DTech Apps team wants to throw in from the previous piece?
I think you covered it.
Okay. So we just saw how the SharePoint connection was embedded in the forms automation solution. So now in part two, let's discover how this interacts with ServiceNow as a whole. So Doc Integrator, that SharePoint connection, can be embedded in any ServiceNow app you have, HRSD, CSM, SPM, and more. Today, we're going to focus on the SharePoint connection and how that can be placed inside compliance, inside IRM, without leaving ServiceNow. So being on the compliance team, we'll begin with the workspace. If you noticed earlier, we saw a few different experiences, such as the portal and the standard ServiceNow platform view. Here, we're going to look at a different user experience, being workspace. In this scenario, we need to collaborate with the team to create policy documentation. So once this is completed, it is published to the whole organization and the current version is retired. So very important, where once we proceed with the current version, it is pushed out to the entire organization. So wanting to keep the documents as secured as possible and locked down is pivotal. So for those of you listening that are familiar with Workspace, particularly here, IRM, this probably looks pretty familiar. You'll see the doc integrator appears just to be another tab, so you may be familiar with a lot of the pieces aside from IRM documents. And this is because this one piece is doc integrator, so it is that ServiceNow connection to SharePoint. And if we are doing this right, you guys shouldn't notice the different experience, as in it is really just another tab within your policy record. So as mentioned previously, we're just inheriting the SharePoint privileges, so read write and any types of permission. Just to quickly outline the completed version. So this is what is active today to your organization in terms of security policies. Working is in process. So what is the compliance team currently working on? And lastly, we have archive. And these documents are those that are already retired. So we're going to focus primarily on the first two today. But again, we're all collaborating on the same versions that we see in front of us. If we want, we can always add documentation or edit this in real time together. Hitting on the SharePoint inheritance that we spoke about a couple times, we can't perform actions that we are not permitted to do individually. So all we're doing is leveraging the permissions from SharePoint. So in this case, we are Adam. We are not the power user. We are not the supervisor. We're not Joaria. So if we try to make certain changes, we may be blocked. And what this is doing is ensuring we have all the proper precautions in place. Again, this is going to be published to the entire agency, the entire organization. So for instance, if we are currently in working documentation and we try to move it to completed policies, it will tell us we don't have that capability, right? We don't have those permissions. And this is just coming in SharePoint. We're not trying to break the system that you have today. So in these two pieces, we went through two flavors of how ServiceNow and SharePoint, that connection can benefit different individuals, different teams, and improve your processes without breaking your system. So just trying to fit within that. Ultimately, this extends ServiceNow's reach, right, their footprint, keeping users in one centralized platform. And as people are navigating, right, their day-to-day, their daily tasks, DTech Apps, what we provide is that bridge between ServiceNow and SharePoint, but customers don't see it as a bridge. They see it as a road.
What David just showed you and taking it kind of a little bit farther. So what David was showing you is more from an application perspective where people would come in and they'd be managing a set of tasks, or they'd be inside of ServiceNow's workspace, or they'd be an agent. What I'm going to show you now, we're targeting at the people who won't be in ServiceNow but need to sign documents. So everything that David showed you and what he laid out, where the documents are in a case and the agent or the person managing the case is still responsible for making sure that everything gets done, but there's a set of signatures that are needed. And this could be run off of a file that's in a case, or this could be run completely independent. We're working with a couple of people right now to build out some document routes. So we're taking the doc generation capability that David mentioned to push metadata directly into PDFs. And then we're pushing it out through a set of routes. So the person would receive an email. So this is an email I just got that said I have something that needs to be signed. If I open that link, it's going to take me into the signature capability, the forms automation route capability that we designed for not everyday users who need to receive forms and sign and process forms. So this is that same 2875 that David was showing you inside of the app. In this case, we need a few different application signatures that are going to happen by different people. So what you're able to do is define routes, and I'll show you a little bit that at the end, but this document's got it's like 6 or 7 signatures that the document needs, and you define who needs to sign them, and we keep track of that and pass it around. So in this case, Abel and Marty have already signed that. The user, we've got a couple of different ways that things that we support. You can make changes in the viewer, but if you need to sign it, you need to get that CAC signature off the desktop. You can either download the file, or if you have SharePoint connected, so this one is a non-SharePoint file, and so you'd have to download it and then bring it back to the system. But if it's a SharePoint file, we do support open in OneDrive, which most government desktops support now. And so if you open in OneDrive, you can actually open the file right on your desk, and when you sign it, it saves back to SharePoint. For this example, I'm going to go ahead and download the file. What we do, even when you're having to stay in the system, we're trying to build this in a way that it makes it very easy for the person to see exactly what they need to do. And so we pop this up to say, hey, you've downloaded the file. Now go ahead and follow these instructions with the file on your desktop. So the file is now on my desktop. I open it up in Adobe. Very similar to what you saw David doing earlier. I sign the file. So I'll actually sign this as me. I've got a few different signatures in my demo environment. And this file has the locking capability where the PDF is designed to lock areas after the signature's applied. So now I've saved that signed file to my desktop. I can then say, okay, I'm done here, and I can drag that file back on here, and I'm done. So now I go ahead and mark that complete. You'll see that it says I now have 2 tasks. Now, what we're doing in this screen is, instead of you getting 18 emails of all the different files, or one email with 18 files in it that you need to sign, we've designed this so that if you have 8 or 10 different PDFs that all need signature, they can all come into this one screen, and they'll just stack up for you here. And you can just go in, make the changes, download the file, sign it, move on to your next one, download the file, sign it. You can see the instructions are changing over here. We give you the ability to lay out what the instructions are going to be and who the routes are going to go to. The screen for that is, let's get to that. So you can put in the name of the route, which you saw on the left-hand side. You can put in instructions for what you want, what the user needs to know in order to be able to complete the file. And then you can put in a due date and an assignee. So all of that's kind of baked into what we're providing for routing and signing documents. And again, it can be a ServiceNow attachment. So we're actually, when it's a ServiceNow attachment, which I showed you there was a ServiceNow attachment, instead of, this one's requiring a sign-in because it's going back to SharePoint. So this file is a SharePoint file. But the ServiceNow attachment, instead of it being a new file name out in ServiceNow, it's actually going to be the, we handle all that for you. So we download it to the desktop. When you save it back in, we keep a version of it. So it's entirely up to you. We have versioning capability baked into it. So if you need to roll it back 2 signatures or roll it back to a previous route, we can pull the file that you had at that point back in if you need to, or we can use the current version of the file and take it back a couple of steps. But we're not creating a brand new file the way that ServiceNow normally would do on a download upload.